him, he wasn't just fighting to survive, he was fighting to build something worth standing for. The crackling sound of wood splintering echoed through the neighborhood as Emma Dawson froze in place, her heart pounding like a war drum. She wasn't sure what she'd heard at first. An accident? A break-in? Or something worse? Her instincts screamed danger. It was only 6:30 a.m., and the sleepy cul-de-sac was bathed in the soft amber hues of dawn. But the unease was undeniable. Just as Emma stepped closer to her front window to peer outside, a figure bolted past her yard, clutching something tightly. A man, disheveled, panicked, and out of place, darted toward the edge of the street. Emma's breath hitched. She wasn't sure if she should call out or keep quiet. Then she noticed the blood. It wasn't a lot, but it streaked the man's hand, dripping faintly onto the sidewalk. "What the?" Emma whispered, her hands trembling as she pulled out her phone. Before she could decide what to do, another sound shattered the eerie calm. A scream. High-pitched, desperate, and not far off. This was no ordinary morning. The next moment felt surreal. A door from a house further down the street flew open, and someone stumbled out, clutching their chest as though they'd been struck. It was Clara, a friendly but quiet neighbor Emma barely knew. Emma flung her door open and dashed toward Clara, her instincts overriding her fear. "Clara, what happened?" Emma gasped, reaching out to steady her. Clara's eyes were wide, her words choked out between labored breaths. He took it. He knows. He knows everything." Emma tried to calm her, but nothing made sense. "Who? What are you talking about?" Clara clung to her like a lifeline, her trembling hand gripping Emma's arm. "Please," she begged, "don't let him get away. If he does, none of us are safe." That was the beginning. And Emma, with no idea what she was stepping into, was about to unravel secrets that would thrust her into a world she never thought possible. Emma's heart raced as Clara slumped against her, still muttering fragments of warnings. She scanned the neighborhood, her gaze darting to where the man had disappeared moments earlier. The quiet streets, so familiar and unthreatening, now felt like the backdrop of something sinister. "We need to call the police," Emma said firmly, pulling Clara toward her porch. Clara's knees buckled, and Emma barely managed to steady her. "No!" Clara cried, clutching Emma's wrist with surprising strength. Her voice was raw with desperation. "They won't understand. They can't. He knows how to stay hidden." "Then tell me what's going on," Emma demanded, her tone sharper than intended. Clara's pale face twisted with hesitation, but before she could answer, a faint sound of an engine revving broke through the early morning quiet. Emma turned just in time to see a black sedan tearing down the street. "That's him," Clara rasped, her voice barely audible over the roar of the car speeding away. "He has it. The file. It's everything." Emma didn't understand, but the panic in Clara's eyes ignited something within her. She couldn't just stand there. Without thinking, Emma bolted toward her car parked in the driveway. "Stay here," she yelled over her shoulder as she jumped into the driver's seat. "What are you doing?" Clara screamed, staggering forward. "Emma, stop. You don't know what you're getting into." Emma hesitated for a fraction of a second, her hands gripping the wheel. "If he's that dangerous, I'm not letting him get away," she called back. And with that, she tore out of the driveway, the tires screeching as she floored the gas pedal. The chase was reckless. The sedan was fast, weaving through the narrow suburban roads like a snake through tall grass. Emma stayed close, her heart pounding in sync with the roar of her engine. Every corner she rounded, every glimpse of the taillights ahead, made her wonder if she was completely out of her depth. What could this man possibly have stolen that Clara thought was worth risking everything to get back? A file? It didn't make sense. The sedan suddenly veered onto a dirt road leading toward the outskirts of town, kicking up clouds of dust. Emma gritted her teeth and followed, her car bouncing over the uneven terrain. Her phone buzzed on the passenger seat, and she glanced at the screen. Clara. Ignoring it, she kept her focus on the sedan ahead, now slowing as it approached an old warehouse looming in the distance. Emma killed her headlights and parked a safe distance away, her chest heaving. The man stepped out of the sedan, glancing around nervously before slipping into the building. She hesitated. Her rational mind screamed at her to turn back, to call the authorities, but something stronger, some deep, unrelenting need to see this through, pushed her forward. Emma crept toward the warehouse, her footsteps muffled by the thick layer of dirt and gravel. The building loomed before her, its rusted walls and shattered windows exuding a foreboding presence. She slipped through a side door left ajar, her breath catching as she stepped inside. The air was damp and cold, carrying the faint stench of mildew. The faint hum of machinery buzzed in the distance. Emma moved cautiously, her eyes scanning the shadows. And then she saw him. The man stood near a table, rifling through a stack of documents. His back was to her, but the tension in his posture was unmistakable. Whatever he was looking for, it was urgent. Before Emma could decide what to do, the man's phone rang, and he answered with a terse, "I have it. Meet me at the docks in an hour." His voice was low but filled with urgency. Emma's pulse quickened. Whoever he was talking to, this wasn't some petty theft. This was bigger, much bigger. As the man ended the call, Emma's foot shifted, and a loose piece of metal clattered to the floor. His head snapped around, his eyes locking onto hers with a predatory intensity that froze her in place. "You shouldn't be here," he growled, his voice cutting through the air like a knife. Emma's throat went dry, but she forced herself to stand her ground. "What did you take from Clara?" she demanded, her voice steadier than she felt. The man smirked, his eyes narrowing. "You don't even know what you've walked into, do you?" Emma barely had time to react before he lunged, closing the distance between them in a heartbeat. She stumbled back, her hand brushing against a rusted pipe on the wall. Without thinking, she grabbed it and swung. The impact sent him reeling, but it wasn't enough to stop him. As he recovered, Emma sprinted toward the exit, her heart hammering in her chest. She burst out into the open air, her lungs burning, and made a beeline for her car. She had to warn Clara. Whatever was in that file wasn't just dangerous, it was deadly. And now she was caught in the middle of it. Emma's tires screeched as she sped back toward the neighborhood, her mind racing faster than the car. Her hands gripped the wheel tightly, the rusted pipe she'd swung earlier now sitting on the passenger seat, smeared with dirt and a faint trace of blood. She couldn't shake the man's words. "You don't even know what you've walked into." Her phone buzzed incessantly. Clara was calling again. Emma picked it up, pressing the speaker button while keeping her eyes on the road. "What the hell did you get me into, Clara?" Emma snapped, her voice trembling with anger and adrenaline. "What's in that file?" Clara's voice was ragged, almost drowned out by her frantic breathing. "Emma, you need to get back here now. We're not safe. They'll come after you too if they know you've seen him. I need answers first." "What's in the file?" Emma demanded, swerving to avoid a trash bin near the curb. Clara's silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. Then finally she whispered, "It's proof. Of everything. What they've done. What they'll keep doing if it isn't exposed. What they—" Emma pressed, glancing in her rearview mirror to ensure she wasn't being followed. "The people who think they're untouchable," Clara said, her voice cracking. "The kind of people who make people like us disappear when we get too close to the truth." Emma's stomach dropped. This wasn't just some neighborhood spat or petty theft. She'd stumbled into something far bigger than she'd imagined. When Emma reached Clara's house, the street was eerily quiet, bathed in the dull glow of streetlights. Clara was pacing on her front porch, her face pale and her eyes darting nervously. Emma barely had the car in park before she jumped out. "You need to start talking now," she said, striding toward Clara. "What's in that file and why does he have it?" Clara hesitated, then gestured for Emma to come inside. She locked the door behind them and drew the curtains, her hands shaking. "It's evidence," Clara began, her voice hushed but urgent. "A paper trail that links a pharmaceutical company to illegal experiments. They've been testing on people, vulnerable people, without consent. Homeless shelters, hospitals, even prisons. And they're covering up the deaths." Emma's knees felt weak. "You're serious," she said, more a statement than a question. Clara nodded. I found out by accident. My sister worked for them. She discovered what they were doing and tried to blow the whistle. 2 weeks later, she was dead. They called it a car accident. But her voice broke, and tears welled in her eyes. Emma sat down heavily on the couch, her mind reeling. So, this guy, he's working for them? No, Clara said, shaking her head. He was supposed to help me expose them. A journalist. But I think he's turned. They must have gotten to him. He wasn't supposed to take the file. He was supposed to publish it. Emma buried her face in her hands. This wasn't just dangerous. It was catastrophic. Why didn't you go to the police? I tried, Clara said, her voice bitter. But they're in on it. Or at least some of them are. The few who aren't don't have the power to take on something this big. This file is the only leverage we have. Before Emma could respond, a loud knock echoed through the house. Both women froze. Clara's face drained of color. They're here. The knock came again, louder this time, followed by a low voice. Ms. Dawson, we know you're inside. Open the door and no one gets hurt. Emma's blood turned cold. She gestured for Clara to stay quiet, then grabbed the rusted pipe she'd brought from the warehouse. Clara pointed toward the back door, mouthing, we can slip out. Emma nodded, gripping the pipe tightly as they crept toward the kitchen. The pounding on the door grew more insistent, and the voice turned threatening. You've got 3 seconds before we come in ourselves. Clara opened the back door as quietly as she could, but just as they stepped outside, a beam of light from a flashlight caught them. Over here, a voice shouted. Emma didn't wait. Run! She yelled, grabbing Clara's arm and pulling her toward the alley behind the house. They sprinted into the shadows, the sound of footsteps and shouting growing louder behind them. Emma's lungs burned, and her legs ached, but she didn't dare slow down. Clara stumbled, nearly falling, but Emma caught her and dragged her forward. Ahead, the alley opened onto a busy street. We need to get to my car, Emma panted. It's the only way out. No, Clara gasped. They'll be watching the roads. We need to lay low until we can figure out our next move. Where? Emma demanded, glancing over her shoulder. Their pursuers were getting closer, their silhouettes just visible in the dim light. There's an old factory on the east side of town, Clara said. It's abandoned. We can hide there. Emma didn't argue. They veered off toward the factory, their breaths coming in ragged gasps. The shouts behind them began to fade, but Emma knew it was only a matter of time before they were found again. When they finally reached the factory, Emma shoved the heavy door open, and they slipped inside. The air was thick with dust, and the faint hum of distant machinery sent a shiver down her spine. Clara collapsed onto the floor, clutching her side. We can't keep running like this, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. We need to fight back. Emma sank to the ground beside her, her mind racing. Then tell me how. Because right now, all I see are 2 people in over their heads. Clara met her gaze, her expression hardening. We still have one thing they don't. What's that? Emma asked. Hope, Clara said. And the truth. As long as we have those, we still have a chance. Emma wasn't sure she believed her, but one thing was clear. They were in this together now. And whatever it took, they weren't going down without a fight. The factory was a labyrinth of broken-down machinery, rusted pipes, and shadows that seemed to stretch endlessly. Emma helped Clara to her feet, both of them scanning the dim interior. The air smelled stale like metal and forgotten years. Emma's grip on the rusted pipe tightened. How long do you think we have before they find us? She whispered. Clara shook her head, wiping sweat from her brow. Not long. They're relentless. We need to plan our next move now. Emma glanced at her phone. No signal. Typical. We can't stay here forever, she said. If they're after the file, they're not stopping until they have it, or us. Clara hesitated, then pulled a small USB drive from her jacket pocket. It gleamed faintly in the dim light, an unassuming object that held the weight of their survival. This is everything, she said, her voice trembling. Names, dates, evidence of payments, it's enough to take them down. If we can get it into the right hands. Emma stared at the drive, the enormity of the situation hitting her all over again. You were carrying it this whole time? Clara nodded. I thought I could trust him, the journalist. But after he took the file, I couldn't risk him destroying this too. Emma took a deep breath, her mind racing. We need to upload this somewhere. Make it public before they catch up to us. Do you know anyone who can help? There's someone, Clara said hesitantly. An old friend of my sister's. He's a hacker, paranoid, but brilliant. If anyone can get this out safely, it's him. Emma nodded. Then we find him. What's his name? Dev, Clara said. But reaching him won't be easy. He doesn't trust anyone. He'll need proof we're not a threat. Emma smirked, despite the gravity of their situation. We're running for our lives. If that's not proof enough, I don't know what is. Hours later, as dawn broke over the crumbling skyline of the city, Emma and Clara sat huddled in the corner of a public library, using an outdated computer. Emma's fingers flew across the keyboard as Clara dictated the location of Dev's underground hideout, a disused maintenance tunnel beneath an old subway station. He's off the grid, Clara explained. No phone, no email. If we're lucky, he'll be there. Emma frowned. And if we're not? Then we're screwed, Clara said bluntly. They printed out a rough map of the subway lines and headed back into the city. Emma's nerves were frayed, her body aching from the events of the past 24 hours. Every time they stepped onto a street, she felt eyes on her, like the shadowy figures chasing them were just out of view. By the time they reached the abandoned subway entrance, Emma's nerves were shot. The iron gate blocking the tunnel was chained shut, but Clara produced a small bolt cutter from her bag, a tool she'd grabbed on their way out of the factory. You've come prepared, Emma muttered. I've had to, Clara replied, her voice grim. The chains snapped with a loud clang, and they slipped inside. The darkness swallowed them immediately, the faint sound of dripping water echoing through the tunnel. Emma pulled out her phone, using its flashlight to guide the way. This place screams, bad idea, Emma muttered. Clara didn't respond. Her focus was on the faint markings along the walls, symbols and arrows that only someone familiar with the path would recognize. After what felt like hours of navigating the maze-like tunnels, they reached a heavy steel door with a keypad. This is it, Clara whispered, stepping forward. She tapped a sequence of numbers into the pad, her hands shaking slightly. The door hissed open, revealing a dimly lit room filled with computer monitors, cables, and stacks of old equipment. A figure emerged from the shadows, a wiry man with glasses perched on the bridge of his nose. His hair was a mess, and his expression was a mix of suspicion and irritation. Clara, he said, his voice low. What the hell are you doing here? Dev, we need your help, Clara said, stepping forward. She held up the USB drive. This is it. The proof. Dev's eyes narrowed as he looked at the drive, then at Emma. And who's she? A friend, Clara said quickly. She saved my life. Dev crossed his arms, clearly unimpressed. You're putting me in a lot of danger just showing up here. If they're after you, they'll be after me soon enough. We don't have a choice, Clara said, her voice pleading. You're the only one I trust with this. Dev sighed, running a hand through his hair. You realize this could get us all killed, right? Clara nodded. I know, but if we don't expose them, more people will die. Dev studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Fine, let me see it. As Dev worked to decrypt the files, Emma and Clara sat in tense silence, every sound from outside the hideout making their nerves jump. Hours passed, and finally, Dev leaned back in his chair, a grim look on his face. This is big, he said. Bigger than I thought. If we release this, it's going to shake things up and paint massive targets on all of us. That's a risk we're willing to take, Clara said firmly. Dev glanced at Emma. You too? You're willing to put your life on the line for this? Emma hesitated, then nodded. Someone has to. Dev turned back to his monitors. All right, let's make some noise. Dev's fingers moved swiftly over the keyboard, his face illuminated by the glow of multiple screens. The USB drive's contents were displayed in full. Spreadsheets, memos, emails, and scanned documents linking the pharmaceutical company to illegal human trials and a string of cover-ups. Emma's chest tightened as she read through the damning evidence. Lives destroyed. Families left without answers. This was a reckoning waiting to happen. This isn't just noise, Dev muttered, his tone grim. This is a war cry. Once I release this, there's no going back. Then do it, Clara said, her voice steady despite the tension in the room. It's time. Dev paused, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. I'll send it to a few whistleblower networks and independent journalists. We need to spread this wide so they can't suppress it. But once it's out there, we're all in their crosshairs. Just do it, Emma urged, her hands clenched into fists. She didn't care about the risks anymore. Too many lives had already been destroyed. They couldn't let fear stop them now. With a final keystroke, Dev launched the files into cyberspace. The screen flashed as the data uploaded to encrypted servers. It was done. The truth was out. For a moment, there was silence, the gravity of what they'd just done settling over them like a heavy weight. Then, Dev's phone buzzed. He picked it up, his expression darkening as he read the message. They know, he said simply. A loud crash outside the steel door made all three of them jump. Emma grabbed the rusted pipe she'd carried since the warehouse, her heart hammering. Clara backed into a corner, her eyes wide with fear. How did they find us so fast? Emma whispered. They've been tracking Clara, Dev said, already packing up his gear. I should have seen it sooner. They must have planted something on her. I don't have anything on me, Clara protested, but Dev ignored her, yanking cables from his computers and shoving hardware into a bag. We can't stay here, Dev said, his voice tight. There's another way out, an old service tunnel. Follow me. The door shuddered as another impact rattled the hinges. Emma glanced at Clara, who was pale but resolute. Let's go, Emma urged, gripping Clara's arm as Dev led the way into a narrow passage hidden behind a stack of crates. The tunnel was cramped and pitch black, the air thick with the smell of damp earth and decay. Emma's flashlight cut through the darkness, revealing a maze of pipes and debris. Behind them, the sound of the steel door being breached echoed ominously. They're inside, Clara hissed, panic creeping into her voice. Keep moving, Dev said sharply, his tone leaving no room for argument. The group emerged from the tunnel into an alley several blocks away. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the city. Dev checked his phone, his fingers flying over the screen. The files are trending, he said. It's everywhere now. They can't stop it. That doesn't mean they won't try to stop us, Emma said, scanning the street for any sign of pursuit. Dev nodded grimly. We need to split up. They'll expect us to stay together. Emma shook her head. No, we're stronger as a group. Stronger, yes, but easier to find, Dev countered. I've done my part. Now it's up to you two to stay alive long enough to see this through. Clara hesitated, then stepped forward, pulling Dev into a hug. Thank you, she whispered. Don't thank me yet, Dev muttered. Get out of here. Both of you. Reluctantly, Emma and Clara turned and headed toward a nearby bus station. They didn't speak as they boarded a bus heading out of the city, their faces drawn and exhausted. Emma watched the city skyline recede into the distance, her mind replaying the events of the past day. They had exposed the truth, but at what cost? 2 weeks later, the fallout was undeniable. The files had sparked an international scandal. The pharmaceutical company's executives were arrested, whistleblowers stepped forward, and protests erupted worldwide. The story dominated headlines, with journalists uncovering even more atrocities tied to the corporation. Emma and Clara watched from the safety of a small, remote cabin provided by one of Dev's contacts. It wasn't much, but it was safe. For now. Do you think it's over? Clara asked one night, staring into the flickering flames of the fireplace. Emma shook her head. No, people like that don't give up easily. But they've been exposed. The world knows now. That's a start. Clara nodded, her expression thoughtful. We couldn't have done it without you. Emma smiled faintly. We couldn't have done it without each other. As the fire crackled and the wind howled outside, Emma felt a sense of peace for the first time in weeks. They had risked everything to fight for justice, and while the road ahead was uncertain, One thing was clear. They had made a difference. And sometimes that was enough. The door slammed open with a force that echoed through the quiet house, startling everyone inside. Logan Mathers, his suit disheveled from the hurried drive, stormed into the living room, his sharp eyes immediately locking onto the scene before him. His daughter, Maya, knelt on the hardwood floor, scrubbing frantically as tears streaked her face. Her shoulders shook, her hands raw and trembling from the harsh chemicals. A man lounged on the couch nearby, smirking at his phone, utterly indifferent to the emotional wreckage playing out just feet away. Maya! Logan's voice cut through the air like a thunderclap. Maya flinched but didn't stop scrubbing. The man on the couch finally looked up, his smirk faltering for just a second before he leaned back lazily, trying to mask his unease. "What's this?" Logan demanded, his voice low and sharp, each word like a razor's edge. He was already piecing the situation together, but he wanted to hear it from someone. Anyone. "She spilled wine," the man, Zach, said with an infuriating nonchalance, gesturing lazily at Maya. "It's her mess. She's cleaning it." Logan's jaw tightened, his fists clenching as he turned his gaze back to his daughter. "Get up," he ordered, his tone leaving no room for argument. Maya hesitated, her trembling hands gripping the cloth tightly. Her eyes darted to Zach, searching for some unspoken permission, but his expression turned cold. Logan saw it, the silent threat, the control Zach held over her. His stomach twisted in rage. "I said, get up," Logan repeated, his voice firm but now tinged with an unmistakable edge of fury. Maya slowly rose, her knees buckling slightly. The fear in her eyes was unmistakable, but it wasn't directed at Logan. It was at Zach. Logan's heart ached at the sight of his once vibrant daughter reduced to this fragile shell. "What's going on here, Maya?" Logan asked, softening his tone as he turned to her. "Talk to me." Before she could respond, Zach stood, adjusting his sleeves as though preparing for a casual conversation. "This is our home, Logan," he said coolly. "And in our home, we handle things our way. You don't just walk in here and—" "Stop talking," Logan interrupted, his voice cutting through Zach's calm veneer like a knife. "You think I'm blind? You think I don't see what's happening here?" Zach smirked, but it didn't reach his eyes. "And what do you think you see? Huh? A husband teaching his wife how to take responsibility. Maybe you've been too soft on her, Logan. That's why she doesn't know." Logan stepped closer, towering over Zach. The smirk finally disappeared as Zach took an instinctive step back. "You don't get to talk about my daughter like that," Logan said, his voice low and dangerous. "Not now. Not ever." Maya stood frozen, her hands trembling at her sides. "Dad, please," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "It's fine. I can handle it." Logan turned to her, his expression softening. "No, sweetheart, you can't. And you shouldn't have to." Logan's presence seemed to fill the room, his towering frame and commanding voice leaving no space for Zach's defiance to thrive. Yet, as he watched his daughter tremble, Logan knew that physical size wasn't the answer. Zach's control over Maya was rooted in something much deeper, something he needed to shatter. "Maya," Logan said gently, keeping his gaze locked on her, "you don't have to explain yourself to anyone, least of all to him." "Excuse me?" Zach snapped, his bravado creeping back. "You can't just—" Logan cut him off with a sharp look, a glare so intense it seemed to drain the color from Zach's face. "Don't speak." Maya's lips parted as if she wanted to protest, but nothing came out. Her eyes flickered between the two men, torn between the fear of her husband's wrath and the safety her father's presence promised. Logan reached out a hand, his tone softening further. "Come here, Maya." Her hesitation was heart-wrenching. For a moment, it looked like she might step forward, but then Zach's voice slashed through the air. "Don't move," he commanded, his tone laced with venom. "You're not going anywhere." Logan's fists clenched, his patience hanging by a thread. But he kept his voice calm as he turned back to Zach. "This ends now," he said. "Whatever power you think you have over her, it's gone. I won't let you keep her here." Zach sneered, leaning back as if unimpressed. And what are you going to do, Logan? Call the police? You think they care about a marital spat? This is between me and my wife, and you have no say in it. Logan's lips curled into a humorless smile. You think you're untouchable because of some legal technicality? Let me remind you who you're dealing with. I didn't claw my way up from nothing just to watch someone like you tear down everything I've built, including my family. For the first time, Zach faltered. His smirk wavered, and a flicker of doubt crossed his eyes. But he quickly masked it with defiance. You don't scare me. Logan stepped closer, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper. I don't need to scare you. I just need to make sure you understand one thing. You've already lost. The silence that followed was electric, the kind that made the hair on the back of your neck stand on end. Maya's breath hitched as her father's words hung heavy in the room. Logan's presence felt unshakable, a force Zach could no longer ignore. But Zach wasn't the type to surrender easily. He straightened, his confidence flickering like a candle fighting against the wind. Lost? Zach scoffed, though his voice lacked its usual venom. You think barging in here and throwing your weight around changes anything? Maya stays here because she wants to. Logan turned slowly toward his daughter, his gaze piercing but filled with an unspoken plea. Is that true, Maya? He asked softly. Do you want to stay here? Maya opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Her hands fidgeted at her sides, the weight of the moment crushing her. She glanced at Zach, whose eyes burned with a silent warning, then back at her father, who radiated nothing but love and determination. Her throat tightened as tears welled up in her eyes. She stammered, her voice breaking. You don't have to answer him, Zach interrupted, his tone sharp as he stepped closer to her. This isn't a family meeting, Logan. You're not part of this marriage. Logan's jaw tightened, but he didn't let Zach's words rattle him. She doesn't owe you silence, he shot back. Then, looking at Maya again, he softened. You owe him nothing, Maya. Not your words. Not your loyalty. Nothing. Her knees buckled, and she sank onto the armrest of the couch, her head dropping into her hands. I don't know, she whispered. I don't know what I want anymore. Logan's heart broke at her words. This wasn't the daughter he remembered. The fierce, confident girl who used to challenge him at every turn. Zach had drained her spirit, reducing her to this shadow of herself. But Logan wouldn't let it stay that way. I know it's hard, Logan said gently, kneeling in front of her. But you're stronger than you think. And you don't have to face this alone. Zach barked out a bitter laugh. What are you trying to do here, Logan? Play the hero? This isn't some fairy tale where you swoop in and fix everything. Logan stood, towering over Zach again, his eyes cold. You're right, he said. It's not a fairy tale. It's real life. And in real life, men like you don't win. Before Zach could respond, Logan turned to Maya and held out his hand. Come with me, Maya. Right now. Zach's face twisted with rage, and he grabbed her wrist before she could move. She's not going anywhere, he growled. That was the breaking point. Logan moved faster than Zach could react, grabbing his arm and wrenching it away from Maya. Zach yelped in pain, stumbling back as Logan stepped between them. Touch her again, and you'll regret it, Logan said, his voice deadly calm. Maya gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. She'd never seen her father like this, calculated and composed, yet brimming with barely contained fury. For a moment, everything felt suspended, the tension so thick it was hard to breathe. Go get your things, Logan told her without looking away from Zach. We're leaving. Maya hesitated, her eyes darting toward the stairs and then back to Zach, who clutched his arm and glared daggers at her. His expression was a warning, an unspoken threat she had grown far too familiar with. But something about her father's unwavering presence gave her the courage to take a step toward freedom. I'll get my things, she whispered, her voice trembling but resolute. She didn't wait for Zach's response and quickly turned toward the stairs. Maya! Zach barked, lunging forward, but Logan stepped in his path, his imposing frame halting him instantly. Don't even think about it, Logan said, his voice like steel. Zach froze, his jaw tightening as he realized he was outmatched. not just physically but in sheer determination. Maya's footsteps faded upstairs, and for a moment, the only sound in the room was the tense rhythm of heavy breathing. Zach's eyes darted toward the door, then back to Logan, as if calculating his next move. But Logan wasn't about to give him the chance. "You've got one chance, Zach," Logan said, his voice calm but laced with menace. "Let her go, and this ends here." Zach let out a humorless laugh, though there was no confidence behind it. "You think you're some kind of savior, huh? You think you can just walk in here and take her? She'll come crawling back. They always do." Logan's fists tightened at his sides, but he didn't take the bait. "You don't know her like I do," he said simply. "And you don't deserve her." Zach's mouth opened to retort, but the sound of Maya descending the stairs silenced him. She carried a small suitcase in one hand and clutched a photo album to her chest with the other. Her steps were shaky, but she didn't stop until she was standing next to her father. "I'm ready," she said quietly, not daring to look at Zach. "You're making a mistake," Zach said, his voice low and venomous. "You think he's going to protect you forever? He'll come back. You'll see." Maya flinched, but Logan placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Ignore him," Logan said. "You don't owe him anything." Zach moved to block the door, his desperation boiling over. "You walk out that door, Maya, and you're dead to me. You hear me? Dead." For a moment, Maya froze, the weight of his words pressing down on her. But then Logan stepped forward, his voice steady and unshakable. "She doesn't belong to you, Zach. Not anymore." Logan opened the door, guiding Maya through it. Zach didn't follow. He stood frozen, his face twisted with fury, as the door slammed shut behind them. The air outside felt lighter, but Maya couldn't shake the heaviness in her chest. She clutched her photo album tighter, her breaths coming in short gasps. Logan led her to his car, opening the passenger door for her before getting behind the wheel. As they pulled out of the driveway, Maya glanced back at the house, her prison for so many years. She expected to feel fear, regret, or even longing. Instead, she felt nothing, just a hollow emptiness that left her staring silently out the window. Logan glanced at her as they drove. "Are you okay?" She didn't answer at first, her fingers tightening around the album. "I don't know," she finally said, her voice barely audible. "That's okay," Logan replied, his tone soft. "You don't have to have all the answers right now. The important thing is that you're out." Maya nodded, but tears spilled silently down her cheeks. Logan didn't press her. He knew this was only the beginning of her journey. What mattered now was making sure she never felt alone again. The drive back to Logan's house was a quiet one, but the tension lingered like a heavy fog. Maya stared out the window, her reflection distorted in the glass as they passed under the amber glow of streetlights. She couldn't bring herself to look at her father. Shame clawed at her insides, mingling with a strange sense of relief. For years, she'd told herself that leaving Zach wasn't an option, that she could endure, that things would get better. Now she wasn't sure what came next. Logan's knuckles whitened as he gripped the steering wheel. He glanced at her every so often, trying to gauge her state of mind, but he didn't press. He knew better than to bombard her with questions. What she needed now wasn't answers, it was time. As they pulled into the long driveway leading to Logan's sprawling home, Maya let out a shaky breath. The sight of the house, lit warmly against the night, stirred memories of safety and simpler times. But it also reminded her of how far she'd drifted from the person she used to be. Logan parked and turned off the engine. He didn't move immediately, his hand lingering on the key. "You don't have to talk about anything tonight," he said finally. "Just know that you're safe here. No one's going to hurt you." Maya nodded but said nothing. She stepped out of the car, clutching her suitcase and the photo album like lifelines, and followed her father inside. The warmth of the house enveloped her as they entered, but it felt foreign, almost surreal. Maya stood in the foyer, her feet rooted to the polished floor as her eyes darted around. The familiarity of it all, her childhood photos lining the walls, the faint smell of cedar from the fireplace, brought a lump to her throat. "I made up your old room," Logan said, breaking the silence. It's exactly how you left it. Thought you might like that. Maya nodded again. Her voice caught somewhere between her heart and her throat. She followed him upstairs, her steps slow and deliberate, as if she was afraid the moment might vanish. When Logan pushed open the door to her room, she froze. It was as though time had stood still. The lavender walls, the bookshelves crammed with novels she'd once adored, even the quilt her grandmother had made, all untouched, waiting for her. "I'll let you settle in," Logan said, stepping back. "If you need anything, just call for me." As he walked away, Maya stepped inside, setting her suitcase down by the bed. She placed the photo album carefully on the nightstand, her hands trembling. Her gaze swept over the room, her chest tightening with every memory that flooded back. Collapsing onto the bed, she buried her face in her hands. The tears came fast and hard, years of suppressed pain pouring out in waves. She cried for the life she had lost, for the version of herself she didn't recognize anymore, and for the fear that had kept her trapped for so long. Downstairs, Logan sat in his study, a glass of water untouched on the desk in front of him. He couldn't get the image of Maya out of his mind, the haunted look in her eyes, the way her hands trembled like she was trying to hold herself together by sheer will. It made his blood boil to think of what Zach had done to her. A buzzing sound broke his thoughts. Logan pulled his phone from his pocket and frowned at the screen. An unknown number. Normally he wouldn't answer, but something in his gut told him this wasn't random. "Hello," he said, his tone cautious. There was a pause, then a low chuckle that made Logan's grip on the phone tighten. "Logan," came Zach's voice, dripping with venom. "You think you've won, don't you?" Logan's jaw clenched. "You have nothing to say to me." "Oh, I have plenty to say," Zach hissed. "You think you can just take her? That I'll roll over and let you destroy my marriage? You don't know who you're dealing with." "I know exactly who I'm dealing with," Logan shot back, his voice icy. "And if you come near her again, I'll make sure you regret it." Zach laughed, the sound cold and sharp. "You can't protect her forever, Logan. She's mine. She'll always be mine." Logan's heart pounded, but he kept his voice steady. "She doesn't belong to you, Zach. She's free. And there's nothing you can do about it." "We'll see about that," Zach said darkly before the line went dead. Logan stared at the phone, his blood boiling. It wasn't over, not by a long shot. Zach wasn't the type to let go easily, and Logan knew he needed to stay one step ahead. Upstairs, Maya sat on the edge of her bed, staring at her reflection in the mirror. She didn't recognize the woman staring back. Eyes red and puffy, her shoulders slumped with exhaustion. But deep inside, she felt the tiniest flicker of something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. For the first time, she was free. But with freedom came uncertainty, and the looming shadow of Zach wasn't far behind. The night stretched on, heavy with an unsettling stillness. Maya tossed and turned in her childhood bed, her mind racing. Every time she closed her eyes, Zach's face loomed in her thoughts. His voice, his threats, the way his smirk could cut her down with a single glance. She clutched the quilt tightly, as if the fabric could shield her from the memories that refused to fade. Downstairs, Logan remained in his study, staring out the window into the dark expanse of his backyard. Zach's phone call echoed in his mind. The venom, the arrogance, it all confirmed what Logan already knew. Zach wasn't going to let this go, and that made him dangerous. Logan leaned back in his chair, pulling out his phone. He scrolled through his contacts until he found the number he was looking for. It was late, but this couldn't wait. After a few rings, a gruff voice answered. "Logan? It's been a while." "Rick," Logan said, his tone firm. "I need a favor." Rick, a retired private investigator and an old friend, immediately picked up on the tension in Logan's voice. "What's going on?" Logan exhaled sharply. "It's my daughter. She's finally left her husband, but he's not letting go. I need eyes on him. Anything he does, I want to know about it. And I need to know if he's hiding anything. Something I can use if he tries to come after her." Rick was silent for a moment. "You think he's going to escalate?" "I don't just think it. I know it," Logan said. "And I'm not taking any chances." Rick let out a low whistle. "All right, Send me his details and I'll get started first thing in the morning. Don't worry, Logan. We'll keep her safe. The next morning, Maya awoke to the smell of coffee wafting through the house. She rubbed her eyes, the events of the previous night crashing down on her like a wave. For a brief moment, she'd forgotten where she was. The warmth and familiarity of her old room had tricked her into believing it was years ago, before everything with Zach. As she shuffled downstairs, she found Logan in the kitchen, already dressed in his usual crisp attire. He turned when he heard her footsteps, offering a small smile. "Morning, sweetheart. I made coffee, and there's some toast if you're hungry." Maya hesitated in the doorway, the simple act of being cared for feeling foreign after so many years of walking on eggshells. "Thanks," she murmured, taking a seat at the counter. She wrapped her hands around the warm mug, letting the heat seep into her palms. Logan studied her, noting the dark circles under her eyes and the way she held herself, as though she might shatter at any moment. He wanted to tell her about Zach's call, about Rick, about the steps he was already taking to ensure her safety. But he held back. She didn't need more weight on her shoulders right now. "How did you sleep?" he asked, keeping his tone light. She shrugged. "It was okay. Better than I expected, I guess." "That's good," Logan said. "One step at a time." Maya looked up at him, her eyes clouded with doubt. "Do you really think it's over? That Zach will just let me go?" Logan's jaw tightened, but he forced a reassuring smile. "He doesn't have a choice. You're not alone in this, Maya. Whatever he tries, we'll handle it. Together." Her eyes flickered with a hint of gratitude, but the fear lingered. "You don't know him like I do," she whispered. "He doesn't give up. He'll find a way." Logan reached across the counter, placing his hand over hers. "Then we'll make sure he doesn't get the chance." Across town, Zach sat in his dimly lit living room, a glass of whiskey in his hand. The house was eerily quiet without Maya's presence. But he didn't care. His anger simmered, bubbling just beneath the surface. She thought she could just walk out, with her father's help, no less. The thought was infuriating. His phone buzzed on the table, and he picked it up without checking the caller ID. "What?" Zach came a sharp, clipped voice. It was his friend Travis, someone who had always shared Zach's distaste for authority. "I heard about your little situation. You gonna let her get away with that?" Zach's grip on the glass tightened. "She's not getting away with anything," he snarled. "Logan thinks he can just waltz in and take her from me. He has no idea what he's dealing with." Travis chuckled darkly. "So, what's the plan?" Zach leaned back, his lips curling into a sinister smirk. "Oh, I've got a few ideas. But first, I need to remind Maya who she belongs to. And her dear daddy? He's about to find out he bit off more than he can chew." Maya's gaze dropped to her coffee, her mind heavy with conflicting thoughts. The uncertainty of what lay ahead loomed large, but something about her father's unshakable confidence gave her a sliver of hope she hadn't felt in years. For the first time in what seemed like forever, she allowed herself to believe that there might be a way out of the nightmare she had lived for so long. Logan watched her, his heart aching for the daughter he barely recognized. The girl who had once been so full of life and laughter, now reduced to this fragile shell. But as much as he wanted to shield her from every pain, he knew that Maya had to find her own path. And it wouldn't be easy. Zach's words still echoed in her mind, the weight of his threats hanging over her like a storm cloud. "I'm scared, Dad," Maya finally admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know how to do this. I've been with him for so long. It feels like I'm walking into the unknown." Logan set his mug down and crossed the room to her, his expression softening. He placed a hand on her shoulder, a gesture of reassurance. "I know it's terrifying. I can't pretend to know what you're going through. But I do know this, you're stronger than you think. And you don't have to do it alone. We'll take it one step at a time." Maya nodded, biting her lip to hold back the flood of emotions threatening to overtake her. She didn't know if she could ever fully recover from the years of abuse, the manipulation, the fear. But for the first time, there was a glimmer of something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time: possibility. The sound of the doorbell ringing broke the quiet between them, and Logan's gaze flicked toward the door. "I'll get it," he said, squeezing her shoulder before heading out of the kitchen. Maya stared into her mug, trying to calm her racing thoughts. The past was never going to leave her completely, but maybe, just maybe, she could build something new. Something for herself. Logan returned a few moments later, his expression more serious than before. "Maya," he said gently, "there's someone here to see you." Maya looked up, confused. "Who?" Logan stepped aside to reveal Rick, his old friend and the retired investigator, standing at the doorway. His tall frame filled the entrance, his presence immediately giving off an air of quiet authority. "Hey Maya," Rick said with a warm but firm smile. "I'm Rick. I was just talking to your dad." She stood up slowly, unsure of what to say. "Hi," she managed, her voice still trembling. "I've been hired to keep an eye on Zach," Rick said without preamble, his voice low and purposeful. "We're going to make sure he doesn't come near you, and if he does, we'll be ready." Maya's chest tightened. I don't know if I'm ready for all of this. I don't know if I want to make things worse." Rick nodded understandingly. "I get it, but you don't have to face him alone anymore, and you don't have to decide everything right now. We'll take it slow, okay?" Logan stepped closer, placing a reassuring hand on Maya's arm. "We're doing this, sweetheart. And whatever you decide, you're not going through this alone." Maya swallowed, trying to steady her nerves. She had no idea what the future held, but she knew one thing for sure. She didn't want to go back. Not to Zach, not to that life. And with her father by her side and people like Rick who were willing to help, maybe she could find a way forward. "Okay," she whispered, the word feeling like a weight lifted off her shoulders. "Let's do this." Rick nodded. "We'll start right away. Just take care of yourself in the meantime. We've got this." As Rick left to start his work, Logan turned to Maya with a proud, gentle smile. "You're doing great, sweetheart. One step at a time." For the first time in years, Maya felt the stirrings of hope. It wasn't over, not by a long shot. But maybe it could be the beginning of something better. Something hers. David Sullivan adjusted his tie, his hands trembling ever so slightly, but his mind was sharp. The deal on the table today wasn't just any deal. It was the one that could skyrocket his company into untouchable heights. Across from him, his best friend and business partner, Ryan, was already seated, scrolling casually on his phone as if the weight of their success didn't rest on this very moment. David's stomach churned with a mix of excitement and anxiety. He excused himself to the restroom, leaving Ryan at the table. The atmosphere of the luxurious cafe was lively, the air filled with the clinking of cutlery and muted conversations of the wealthy patrons. But as soon as David was out of earshot, something sinister unfolded. Emily, a waitress with quiet diligence, approached to refill Ryan's water. She wasn't in the habit of paying attention to what the patrons said, but today her ears caught words that froze her in place. Ryan's tone was low and deliberate as he spoke into his phone. "Yeah, everything's set," Ryan muttered. "David has no clue. Once this deal goes through, the company's mine. By the time he realizes what's happened, he'll be out in the cold." Emily nearly spilled the water pitcher as her breath hitched. Her heart raced, her instincts screaming at her to intervene. But what could she do? She was just a waitress, a bystander in the world of power and wealth. Yet, she couldn't shake the urgency of what she'd overheard. Ryan, the man David trusted most, was plotting a brutal betrayal. David returned to the table moments later, oblivious to the storm brewing beneath the surface. Ryan greeted him with a smile so convincing, it would have fooled anyone. Anyone except Emily, who stood at the edge of the room, her hands shaking as she wrestled with a decision. Should she stay silent and carry on with her day? Or should she risk everything to warn a stranger? Emily clenched her fists, her mind racing. She didn't belong in their world. These people, with their designer suits and power-laden conversations, were far removed from her own life. But she couldn't unhear what she'd heard. Something about David's unguarded, trusting demeanor made her stomach twist with guilt at the thought of letting him walk into a trap. She watched as Ryan stood up to take a call outside, leaving David alone at the table, flipping through the contract before him. This was her moment. Her legs felt like lead as she approached him, her voice a whisper as she said, "Excuse me, Mr. Sullivan." David looked up, surprised. His brows furrowed slightly, but his tone was polite. "Yes." Emily hesitated, her heart thudding against her ribs. This man didn't know her, and she had no real proof to back her claim. But she had to try. "I don't want to overstep, but I overheard something. Something about your partner, Ryan." David's expression softened, but there was also a trace of confusion. "Go on," he said cautiously. Emily leaned in slightly, lowering her voice. "I think he's planning to betray you. He was on the phone just now. He said once the deal is done, everything will be his." The words hit David like a gut punch. He blinked, trying to process what she just said. "That's impossible. You must have misunderstood." "I didn't," Emily said firmly, her voice trembling slightly. "I know I'm just a waitress, and this might sound crazy, but I could not tell you. He said you wouldn't see it coming." David leaned back, his mind racing. The room seemed to tilt ever so slightly. This was Ryan, his best friend since college, the man who'd stood by him through sleepless nights and ruthless boardroom battles. The thought of betrayal was unfathomable, but there was something in Emily's earnestness that planted a seed of doubt. "Thank you," he said after a long pause. I'll look into it." Emily nodded, relief washing over her face as she stepped back. She glanced nervously toward the door, where Ryan was still outside, pacing on his phone. She'd done her part, but the weight of her revelation lingered as David's expression hardened. When Ryan returned, his charm was in full force. He slid back into his seat, flashing an easy grin. "So, where were we?" David forced a smile, his heart thundering. "Just going over everything one last time." Ryan nodded, pouring himself more water. "Good man. You always double-check things. That's why we make such a great team, right?" David's throat tightened. He nodded absently, but the words now felt hollow. The celebration that had felt certain hours ago was now drenched in unease. The doubt Emily had planted began to grow roots, twisting through David's mind. Could Ryan really betray him? As the evening wore on, David's suspicions deepened. He needed answers, and fast. After dinner, he stepped outside, pulling out his phone to call someone he trusted. Julian, a private investigator he'd worked with in the past, answered on the second ring. "David Sullivan," Julian greeted, his tone brisk. "What's the situation?" "I need you to look into someone for me," David said, his voice tight. "Ryan King, my business partner. Something doesn't feel right." Julian didn't hesitate. "I'll start right away. Give me 48 hours. David ended the call, the knot in his stomach tightening. He turned to see Emily lingering near the cafe's entrance, watching him with a mix of concern and hope. "Did you talk to him?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't sign anything," David replied, "but I need proof." "Thank you for telling me." Emily nodded, her relief palpable. I hope I'm wrong. For your sake." David gave her a tight smile, but deep down, he knew the storm was far from over. 2 days later, Julian called back. "David," Julian said, his tone grim. "You're not going to like what I found." David gripped the edge of his desk. "Tell me." "Ryan's been moving funds out of your accounts. Small amounts, just below the threshold of suspicion. He's funneling them into an offshore account. The transfers started about a year ago, right around the time you began negotiating this new deal." David's breath hitched. "How much are we talking?" "Millions," Julian replied bluntly. "Close to 5. And that's not all. He's been in contact with your competitors. It looks like he's setting up to take control of the company once you sign the deal." David's stomach turned. It was true. Emily had been right. "I want him stopped," David said, his voice cold. "What do I need to do?" "Freeze the accounts he's been using," Julian advised. "You've got enough evidence to justify it. But be careful. Don't let him know you're onto him until you're ready to move." David nodded, his resolve hardening. Ryan had crossed a line, and there was no turning back. That evening, David invited Ryan to a private meeting at their office. Ryan arrived, all smiles, but the moment he stepped into the room, he could feel the shift in the air. "What's going on?" Ryan asked, his smile faltering. David stared at him, his jaw tight. "I know everything. The offshore accounts. The stolen funds. The betrayal." Ryan froze, but only for a moment. Then he leaned back, his smirk returning. "You've been working too hard, David. You're imagining things." "Don't lie to me," David snapped. "I've seen the transfers. I know about the competitors. You've been planning this for over a year." Ryan's mask slipped. For a brief second, fear flickered in his eyes before he leaned forward, his tone venomous. "Fine," Ryan hissed. "Yeah, I planned it. Do you have any idea what it's been like? Standing in your shadow while you get all the credit? I deserve more, David. And I wasn't going to wait around for scraps." David's anger boiled over. "You could have talked to me. We could have worked something out. But instead, you decided to steal from me. From us." Ryan's expression darkened. "You wouldn't have done anything. You're too busy being the golden boy." "I did what I had to do." "No, Ryan," David said coldly. "You didn't have to do this. And now you're done. The accounts are frozen. The evidence is in my hands. It's over." Ryan's face twisted with rage. "You think you've won? This isn't over, David. I'll make sure you regret this." David stood his ground. "Get out of my sight." As Ryan stormed out, David felt a wave of emotions. Anger, sadness, betrayal. But there was also relief. He caught Ryan before it was too late. David stood in the empty office, the echo of Ryan's threats ringing in his ears. He had fought too hard, built too much to let it all crumble now. The betrayal burned deeply, but the confrontation had steeled his resolve. Ryan was out of the picture, but the aftermath was far from over. David turned to his phone and made a call. Within minutes, his legal team was mobilized. They would ensure the company's accounts were secured, all ties with Ryan severed, and the stolen funds recovered. Yet, even with the financial safeguards in place, David couldn't shake the sting of betrayal from someone he had considered family. The next morning, David arrived at the office to find Emily waiting near his door. She looked hesitant, clutching a small notebook against her chest. "Emily," he greeted, his voice softer than usual. "Hi, Mr. Sullivan," she replied nervously. "I just wanted to check in. After everything that happened. Are you okay?" David paused, genuinely touched by her concern. "I'm getting there. Thanks to you, I caught this in time." Emily shifted on her feet. "I'm glad I could help. But, is it really over? I mean, people like him don't just give up." David nodded slowly. "You're right. Ryan's dangerous and he's not done. But I'm ready for him now." He hesitated before adding, "You've done more for me than I can ever repay. If you ever need anything at all, just say the word." Emily's cheeks flushed slightly, but she shook her head. "You don't owe me anything. I just did what I thought was right." David offered a faint smile. "It's rare to meet someone with that kind of courage. If you ever change your mind, my door is always open." The next few days were a whirlwind of damage control. David worked closely with Julian and his legal team to ensure Ryan couldn't retaliate, but the tension remained palpable. Then, just as things seemed to settle, Julian called with an update. "David," Julian began, his tone grave, "we found something. Ryan's not done. He's trying to smear your name." David's grip tightened on the phone. "What do you mean?" "He's reaching out to media outlets, spinning lies about you. Financial misconduct, offshore dealings, corruption. Most of it's baseless, but a few grains of truth could make the lies stick." David clenched his jaw. "Can we stop him?" "We're working on it," Julian assured him. "I've already contacted some of the journalists. The good news is we've got more than enough evidence to discredit him. But you need to brace yourself. It's going to get messy." David sighed, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. "Do whatever it takes. I won't let him win." The storm hit the next morning. A prominent business blog published an article accusing David of unethical practices. The piece was riddled with inaccuracies, but the damage was immediate. Investors started calling, concerned about the allegations. The company's stock dipped slightly. Emily burst into his office, a copy of the article clutched in her hand. "David, have you seen this?" "I have," David said grimly, rubbing his temples. Emily's eyes blazed with determination. "This is all lies. What can we do?" David looked at her, his exhaustion evident. "We stay ahead of it. Julian's team is already working on countering the story. But the next few weeks are going to be rough." Emily stepped closer. "Whatever you need, I'm here." Her sincerity was a balm to David's frayed nerves. He nodded. "Thank you, Emily. That means more than you know." In the days that followed, David and his team launched a full-scale response. They released detailed statements debunking Ryan's claims and presented evidence of his betrayal and fraud. The tide began to turn as the media shifted focus, painting Ryan as the villain. Throughout it all, Emily was a constant presence. She worked tirelessly, assisting with everything from drafting statements to calming nervous investors. Her quick thinking and unwavering support were invaluable, and David began to rely on her more than ever. One evening, as the office emptied out, David found Emily still at her desk, poring over documents. "You should go home," he said, leaning against her cubicle wall. "I'm almost done," she replied with a small smile. David shook his head. "Emily, you've already done more than enough. I don't know how I would have gotten through this without you." She looked up at him, her expression warm. "You would have managed. But I'm glad I could help." David hesitated for a moment. "You're not just helping, Emily. You've become an essential part of this company. Have you ever thought about taking on a bigger role?" Emily blinked, taken aback. "A bigger role?" "Yes," David said. "You've proven yourself over and over again. I think it's time to make it official." In the weeks that followed, Emily's transition from behind-the-scenes assistant to a leadership role was seamless. David announced her promotion at a company meeting, citing her dedication and exceptional instincts as key reasons for the decision. For Emily, the shift was surreal. She went from a waitress serving tables to a respected corporate leader in a matter of months. But the journey hadn't been easy, and she was determined to make the most of the opportunity David had given her. As she stood in her new office one evening, looking out at the city skyline, she couldn't help but reflect on how far she'd come. The challenges ahead didn't scare her, they fueled her. And for David, watching Emily rise to the occasion reminded him that even in the darkest moments, there was always a glimmer of hope. Together, they had faced betrayal and chaos, but now, they were building something stronger than ever. Ryan's shadow still loomed in the background, but David knew one thing for certain. With Emily by his side, there was nothing they couldn't overcome. A week after the company stabilized and the false media storm died down, David received an unexpected call from Julian. His investigator's voice was steady but tinged with urgency. "We've got him, David," Julian said. David leaned forward in his chair, his pulse quickening. "What do you mean?" "Ryan's been hiding in plain sight," Julian explained. "We traced his communications back to a private suite in a luxury hotel downtown. He's still trying to push his lies to anyone who will listen, but his resources are running out. And here's the kicker, he's also making calls to some dangerous people. It looks like he's desperate for leverage." David frowned. "Dangerous how?" "Send me everything," David said, his voice hard. "I want this done for good." Within hours, David's legal team filed a new motion to expose Ryan's financial dealings and block his access to any remaining resources. Meanwhile, Julian tipped off the authorities about Ryan's suspected illegal activities, ensuring that his every move was being watched. That evening, David sat in his office when Emily walked in, holding a report. "They've frozen the last of Ryan's accounts," she said, her tone firm. "And his connections are backing off now that the truth about him is out." David nodded, the tension in his shoulders finally easing. "He's done. There's nothing left for him to use against us." Emily hesitated before sitting across from him. "You've handled this with so much strength. I don't know if I could have done the same." David smiled faintly. "I didn't do it alone. You've been my anchor through all of this, Emily." Her cheeks flushed slightly, but she met his gaze with quiet confidence. "It's what you deserve. For someone to have your back." 2 days later, the final blow came. Ryan was arrested on charges of fraud and embezzlement after Julian uncovered evidence tying him to illegal offshore transactions. The headlines shifted, painting him as a disgraced businessman whose greed led to his downfall. For David, the closure was bittersweet. Ryan had been a friend once, and the betrayal still stung, but justice had been served. At the company's next meeting, David addressed the entire staff. "We've been through challenges that could have broken us," he said, his voice strong. "But we came out stronger because of people like Emily, who remind us of what integrity and loyalty truly mean." The applause was thunderous as Emily stood beside him, her heart swelling with pride. As weeks turned into months, Emily continued to thrive in her leadership role, proving herself indispensable to the company. And for David, watching her succeed was a reminder that even in the darkest times, hope and resilience could lead to something extraordinary. In the end, they weren't just rebuilding the company, they were forging a new legacy together. The storm was over, and the future was theirs to shape.